All right, we are live. Take it away, Jaffer.
Oh, we are live. So, hi everybody. My name is Jaffety, man. I'm speaking on behalf of the Islam Awareness Week 2021 programming committee. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, MSA UCR is hosting Islam Awareness Week this week. Our purpose is to share information of our faith to others and connect more closely with the community. We do not want to be starting any debates nor cause anyone to feel uncomfortable. We just want everybody to have some great vibes. If you did feel a certain way, please feel free to let us know through our survey. We'll be sending towards the latter half of the event. Before we did not provide any options, so if to be anonymous. However, we are going to be doing that today. So if you want to be critique of us, just drop it through. We'll be cool. So just as a recap, yesterday we had the letters for solidarity for the prison inmates, and that went very, very well for those of you who were there. So we're going to be continuing on today with our prophets and revelations talk with Dr. Imad Bayoun is going to be our speaker. And then, so what's going to happen is tomorrow, on Friday, we'll be having our event and breakout rooms with our speakers. And there's going to be raffles every single day that's going to be going on. So if you didn't get any prizes for the last 2 days, you can still get them great prizes for the next few days. So don't worry, there's a lot more. And if you're there for 3 days in a row for events, or 3 days in total, you can get some of the biggest events. So don't worry about that. And then, so just to quickly introduce our team for today, my name is Jaffrey Man, as I just said. We also have my man Sean Sayib right there on the very top. We got my boy Safi Bedra right on top of me right here. And then we got the speaker, the man, the myth, the legend, Dr. Imad Bayoun right there to help us all out. So it's going to be great. And so the third and final option is that for anybody, you guys can put all the things that you want in the chat, any questions, comments, concerns, whatever it may be. We're going to be looking at that. And then you can continue to sign up on Eventbrite for all of the things that we're going to be doing this. So I want to also say, first and foremost, thank you to everybody for joining this event. It means a lot to be able to get out of your comfort zone if you're somebody of a different faith or belief, and to be able to come in and get this information. It means a lot. So I commend every single one of you guys for coming through to this event. And so without further ado, to give it again to my man, Dr. Imad Bayoun, the floor is all yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Jafar. And then I greet everybody with the greeting of Islam, and the greeting of Islam is a greeting of peace. So peace be upon you. Assalamu alaikum. Yes, it is a greeting of peace, despite what you might hear otherwise on Fox News and some of the other weapons of mass deception. So anyway, the discussion today is about the prophethood in Islam and what do Muslims believe in. And I would like just to urge initially, actually, just to my non-Muslim guests not to feel offended by anything that I say. I mean, obviously, I'm just presenting the Islamic perspective on the topic, so we can talk about how similar we are, but there are still actually some differences. And I think, knowing about the differences would be as essential as knowing about the similarities and knowing how to deal with each other's and to dissipate a lot of the stereotype. So just look at it as a book, like you're reading a book. Obviously, you're not going to disagree with everything, that you read in a book, but that's really what the topic is. So one of the basic tenets of the Islamic faith is the belief in prophethood. So which means that the Muslims believe that God sends prophets and messengers that would be entrusted with conveying his divine guidance to humanity. So that's really what the job of the prophets. The prophets and the messengers basically would be entrusted with the divine guidance that they would convey to humanity. So, and this is really important, when it comes to the specificity actually of the message. Because a person actually may come to a conclusion on their own that there is a God, or maybe not. Maybe they will not come to that conclusion, But what I'm saying is that people can come to a conclusion that there is a creator for this universe by looking at the creation, the perfection of the creation, this whole universe around us. Someone might come to the conclusion that there is a creator, that this world cannot exist on its own. But then afterward, so this is something that a human can come to on their own, can conclude on their own. But then afterward, what does this creator want of me? Why did he create me? What is the purpose of my existence? How do I connect with that creator? Is there something else beyond what I see actually? What's there? And how do I go there? How do I connect with there? So that's the job of the prophets and the messengers. So here, these big questions that I just mentioned, we cannot answer on our own. This is not something, so a human being, no matter how smart the person is, cannot come to the conclusion, or to a conclusion as to why he was created for. We can talk about that, we can philosophize it, but the real answers have to be given to us, and that's the job basically of the prophets and the messengers, that they convey that information from the creator to the human beings. So who are the prophets and the messengers? What are they? We believe that prophets are human beings. They're men, according to Islam, that all the prophets are males. So we don't have female prophetess, but they're all actually males. So we believe that prophets are humans that God selects among the larger humanity. So God selects few from all the humanity that he will give them his divine revelation. So they're human. So we believe in Muhammad as being a human. So Muhammad in Islam is not the equivalent of Jesus in Christianity. Now, we believe in Jesus, by the way, but we believe in him as human. And that's one of the main, probably the main difference between Islam and Christianity, is in the status of Jesus. So in Islam, Muhammad is, who's the last prophet, or the prophet of Islam, is a human being, just like a regular human being, but a great human being. That's someone with an infallible character, with an impeccable character that God selects to give him his divine revelations. So what's special about the prophets, first of all, of course, is that they receive the divine revelation, the message from God, the words of God. And we believe that that happens through the angel Gabriel, that Gabriel is the angel, the great angel that conveys the divine message from God to all the prophets, to Muhammad and all the earlier prophets. And we also believe that each prophet is supported by a miracle. That
Dr. Imad,
yes.
I think your audio, you know how like sometimes your audio turns into like Darth Vader's voice?
Oh, is it doing that?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. Let me see if I can. Isn't that nice? Let me try to change the microphone.
Okay. Sounds good.
Microphone real high.
Can you hear me now?
Oh yeah, that sounds really good actually.
Is it better?
Yeah, it is.
I have to keep holding this now. Where did it start doing that? Where did it start doing that? How far back do I have?
It was literally just like a second or two before I joined.
Okay. So do I test you as to what I said?
I'm gonna go on the backstage again.
Okay. Let me just. For some reason I don't know why, it's probably my audio thing. See, I have to hold this. Okay. Hopefully, can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's good.
Is it good?
Yeah.
Okay. So what I was saying, I think that's where you stop. Hopefully it will hold. You know what? Just give me a second. This is my face mask. Okay. I'm hoping this will hold it in place. So anyway, so what I was saying is that prophets receive the divine revelation. That's the big thing, But also prophets are supported by miracles, which means that God gives prophets control over certain power, if you call it that way, that proves their prophethood, because people claim to be prophets all the time. Some time ago, you guys were not even born yet, in Texas, Waco, there was a guy by the name of David Koresh. He claimed to be a prophet. And then after that, he claimed to be God himself. The guy was nuts, Of course, it's a big thing. So anyway, so people claim to be prophets all the time. So a miracle basically substantiate that claim that the prophets have. For example, prophet, for example, Moses had the staff that basically turned into a snake, and then basically he parted the sea. So these are things that are basically out of the ordinary, supernatural, that proves that he is a prophet. Jesus, for example, he was able to cure the sick, to bring the dead back to life. All of these are miracles that prove that they are prophets. So that's really what prophets are. They receive the revelation, and afterward, that they're supported by miracles. Then from these prophets, few of these prophets are selected further by being giving something extra in addition to what I mentioned earlier. And these are the messengers. So the messengers are given something extra in addition to what I mentioned earlier. And what they're given is a set of instructions, what we call the Sharia, the Shakira law, the Sharia or the Sharia law. So each messenger has a set of instructions. And here, this is talking about the do's and don'ts, by the way. That's why an example of a messenger in Islam is Jesus, is Moses, and Muhammad as well. So these are given basically a set of instructions that serves the set of belief that the prophets have brought forth. Now, how many of them are there? The Quran actually mentions 25 of them. But these are not all of them. So these are basically some of them. So that includes, in Islam, that includes Adam, Noah, Abraham, Jacob, Ishmael, Joseph, Jonah, David, Solomon, Moses, Muhammad, and Moses, Jesus, and Muhammad. So these are all prophets in Islam, that we have to believe in. So we do believe in Jesus, but we believe that Jesus actually was a human being like all the other prophets. And the Quran says that the example of Jesus is like that of Adam. Adam was created with neither a father nor a mother. And the Quran says, well, Jesus was created with a mother but without a father. So his creation was miraculous in that regard, but he's still a human being. He's still a human being in Islam, one of the greatest human beings in Islam. So we believe actually in Jesus. And also one of the things, and that's one of the other differences that Muslims believe in when it comes to Jesus, and again, no offense to my non-Muslim friends, is that we do not believe that Jesus was crucified, but we believe that Jesus was raised before the crucifixion, and we believe that he will return toward the end of times. Now, who was crucified? Islam says, the Quran says that he was not killed and he was not crucified, but it was made to them to look as if they did. Then who was crucified? There are two versions actually in Islam as to what exactly happened. It did not specify where. So these are not like certain as to what happened. One of the versions, it says that the younger of the disciples of Jesus offered himself as a sacrifice for Jesus. So he was made to look like Jesus, and he's the one that was crucified instead. The other version of the story says that it was the traitor among the disciples, Judas, that was made to look like Jesus, and he's the one that was crucified. So we're not really sure which of the two versions is really what happened. But one thing that is specified for sure in Islam, again, according to Islam, is that he was not killed and he was not crucified. And by the way, Mary, the mother of Jesus in Islam, is the greatest woman ever. So in Islam, the greatest woman that ever lived is Mary, the mother of Jesus. And the interesting thing is that all the prophets in the Quran, normally they're mentioned by their first name. Joseph, Jacob, Isaac, Ishmael, Abraham, except Jesus. He's always mentioned as Jesus, the son of Mary. So anyway, her name was raised in honor that whenever his name is mentioned, then her name is mentioned with that as well. So there are 25 of them that are mentioned in the Quran by name, but the Quran says that these are not the only ones. So the Quran says that there are some that we told you about and some that we did not tell you about. So how many were there? There's one of the sayings of Muhammad, of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, that says that the actual number of the people that were sent as prophets to this world were 124,000. And of those 124,000, 315 were messengers. Remember, that I said that prophets are selected among the human. And among the prophets, few of them are selected further to become messengers. So the messengers are fewer, obviously. So every messenger is a prophet, but not every prophet becomes a messenger. So that's how many there are. Now, I said that we believe in the earlier prophets. We believe, in all the other prophets that I mentioned. We believe in Adam, in Noah, in Abraham, in Jacob, in Joseph, Job, all the way to Jesus, Muhammad, to Moses, Muhammad, and Moses, Jesus, and Muhammad. So does that mean that we believe basically now in the existent Bible. That this is something, well, you say you believe in Jesus, so why don't you follow the Bible? Now, first of all, and again, no offense, with that, that's really what we believe in, that we believe that the original Bible was not preserved. So we don't believe that the existent one is the original one. The different versions of the existent one, whether the King James, the New American Standardized, and whatnot, we don't believe that these are the original ones. And we also believe that each time a prophet is sent, then he's the one that has to be followed. Now, we believe that all the prophets and the messenger brought forth basically the same set of beliefs. So when it comes to the belief, they're all exactly the same, we believe. We believe that they all preach the oneness of God. We all believe they all preach the accountability, the hereafter, the good, the bad, the good morals and the bad morals. But there are differences from one to the other that reflect the differences in time and the needs, in different times. So that's why there will be differences between one prophet and the other. That's why each time one of them is sent, we believe that he is the one that has to be followed. So, for example, during the time of Moses, according to the Islamic teachings, a person cannot say, well, Moses is good, but I'm just gonna follow the teachings of Abraham. No, at the time of Moses, it is Moses that has to be followed. At the time of Jesus, it is Jesus that has to be followed. And at the time of Muhammad, it is Muhammad that has to be followed according to the Islamic teachings. So this is what we believe in. So we believe that Muhammad is the last prophet and messenger. We believe that he's the last prophet and messenger. But I just said that Jesus is coming back. So when that make him the last one? No, we believe that Jesus is coming back toward the end of times, but he will not come back as a new prophet or a new messenger. He will come back and he will follow the guidance or the teachings of Muhammad when he comes back. This is what we believe. Okay. Any question or comment so far, by the way? I speak too fast, I know. Yes, no? By the way, I'm on campus in here. That's in my office. I was explaining to the guys, this is the secretary and quarantine building. So anyway, so what about the Quran? I said that each prophet has a miracle. What is the miracle of Muhammad? The miracle of Muhammad, we believe, is the Quran itself, the book of the Quran. Now, would you say that the Quran is the equivalent of the Bible actually in Christianity? Yes and no. Yes, in the sense that it is basically our holy book. So our holy book is the Quran itself, but no in the way that it in the content of it actually. So what? Okay, let me question by Damien. Do any of the prophets contradict each other's? No, they will not contradict each other's. We don't believe that they will ever contradict each other's in the teachings. However, they may be different from one another in the reflecting the difference in the environment, in the guidance, for example, but they will not contradict. So, for example, you're not going to have someone that says, okay, that cheating is right, the other one saying cheating is wrong, or the one says that, for example, that God is not one, the other one says God actually is only one. So in that regard, we don't believe actually they would contradict each other. So going back to what I was saying. So what was I saying? Okay, the Quran. So what I said, that the Quran is different than the Bible in that if you read the Bible, the different versions that exist today, they are about Jesus. So they will say, for example, Jesus said this, Jesus did that. So it's like somebody who is basically narrating what happened. In Islam, this is equivalent to something that we call the hadith, or the sayings of Muhammad, about Muhammad said this, Muhammad did that. But the Quran is different in that regard. The Quran is different in that we believe that the Quran is the words of God spoken in the first person. So the first person. So in other words, when I read the Quran, I read it says that, "O people who believe, or those who believe, do this and don't do that. Believe in me. I'm your Lord." So it is the words of God spoken in the first person, and it is only the Arabic text. That's why, by the way, you only have one version of the Quran. You don't have more than one version. If you look at any copy of the Quran here in China, in India, in France, in Argentina, it's exactly the same to the letter. Whether today or 1400 years ago, it's exactly the same to the letter. So there are no two versions of the Quran. Now, there are translations of the meanings. Like, for example, some is translated into English, into Spanish, into French, into Hindi, into different languages. But these are subjective translations. So we don't regard the translations as Qurans. So there's no French Quran, for example, or English Quran. The Quran is only actually the Arabic one. That's something actually to emphasize. So the Quran is, to the Muslims, is the words of God spoken in the first person. So the very words of God addressing actually the human. And there's only actually one version of the Quran. How was it? How did it come to what it is today? A small actually book. I think I may have a copy in here. Nope. The Quran, of course, was written. The whole Quran was written during the life of Muhammad. So it was not written after his death, but it was written during his lifetime. He had scribers, people that would write the revelations. Every time something comes down to him, through Angel Gabriel, he would ask the scribers to write it down. And they would write it, they would recite it back to him to double check that what they wrote is the correct thing. So the whole Quran was written during the life of Muhammad. Then after the death of Muhammad, everything that was written was compiled together according to a certain process. There's a certain process that after Muhammad died, the first leader after him, his name is Abu Bakr. Basically what he did, he asked one of the scribers that used to write for Muhammad to compile the whole Quran according to some criteria. What is that? And the criteria here is that if you have written anything that you heard directly from Muhammad, even though he himself, memorized the whole Quran, so he could have easily written it himself. But he wanted to make sure that he follows a certain procedure. So he asked those that wrote anything from Muhammad to bring it to him. And he says that I will only accept it if you have two witnesses. So with that, they were able to compile whatever was written at the time of Muhammad on whatever parchment they had. They had, let's say, for example, different sheets, leaves, skins, leather, whatever it is. That's how it was written. The papers only came back later on. And then afterward, after the third caliph, which is like a few years later on, basically what he did, he brought that which was compiled and he made master copies on parchments that were available at that time. So he made the master copies, I think 6 or 7 of them, and 2 of these still exist today. One of them is believed to exist in Tashkent, and the other one actually in Turkey. And they are exactly like the one that we have today. They're no different, except of course the font was different. So the calligraphy or the way they used to write was different actually at that time. They didn't have some of the dotting and some of the short vowels. So the whole original Quran, so to speak, actually, or the master copies still exist today and they're preserved. And they are, like I said, exactly like the ones that we have today. Now, the funny thing is that, of course, you can verify that by carbon dating. But there's also another interesting way that you can verify that is by the calligraphy style. Because the style of calligraphy actually has evolved. And if you show me actually a piece of writings, I can tell you, even without looking at the carbon dating, I can tell you which era actually that came from. Because the Arabic script has gone through certain stages of evolution as to how it is written. And I can tell by looking at which stage in the evolution process it was when this was actually written. But the point to emphasize in here again is that the whole Quran was written during the life of Muhammad, and it was compiled immediately after his death, and master copies were made. 2 of these still exist today, and they are exactly like the one that we have today. So that's why, again, there are no 2 versions of the Quran. There's only one version of the Quran, whatever actually you look. But with that, the Quran was not only preserved, and this is something really interesting, by the way, was not only preserved in writing. The Quran also was preserved in reciting. That's why, by the way, people that are serious about memorizing the Quran, they will not just depend on the book they will read. And there are quite few people, by the way, Muslims, that memorize the whole Quran verbatim to the letter, from the beginning, from cover to cover. This is something that is not uncommon among the Muslims, that people do memorize the whole Quran. But the people that are serious about studying the Quran, they will not just study it, let's say, from a book, but they have to study it actually from a mentor. And after memorizing the whole Quran, they will get some kind of a certificate, which is a very interesting certificate. And what that certificate is called ijaza, by the way, in Arabic. It would list all the people, the different generations that it went through to get to the person who's studying. So, for example, let's say, I studied the whole Quran under Ja'far, for example. Ja'far was my teacher of the Quran, let's say, for example. And Ja'far's teacher was, let's say, Safi. And Safi's teacher was, let's supposing that each one actually that we each belong to a different generation. So I studied it from Ja'far, who studied it from Safi, who studied it from Shan, for example, who studied it from Yahya, going all the way back to the Prophet himself. So what the certificate basically lists is all the names. It says, I myself was certified to have studied the Quran from Ja'far, who studied it himself from Safi, who studied it himself from Shan, who studied himself from Yahya, and it lists all the names all the way back to Muhammad. So some people have this long list of the certificates, so to speak, that again emphasizes that the Quran was not just preserved in writing, but also preserved in reciting. So in other words, generations passed it to generations, to the generations after, to the generations after, until it came to us. And the proof to that, by the way, is in the way that it was recited. Normally, the Arabic language is not always, by the way, the easiest language. The pronunciation, that we have a lot of throaty letters. And the way that it is read, there are some strict rules as to how it is read properly, especially with the Quran. There are certain things that could have easily been lost if it was only preserved in writings. That the way we recite, for example, the beginning of the different chapters, like the chapter of Mary, the mother of Jesus, one of the greatest chapter in the Quran. It starts with certain letters, kaf, ha, ya, ayn, sad, that you read it differently than if you would by reading it like normally. So you read the letters in a certain way that again proves that the Quran was not just preserved in writing, but also preserved in the way that it is recited, in reciting. So it was passed from generation to a generation to a generation, and so on. Any question, by the way, so far? You mentioned earlier that at the time of Moses, they followed his teachings. Is all of his writings in the Quran? No, not all of it. That's a good question. See, the thing is that we don't know in Islam actually what was preserved from the earlier teachings and what was not. So the Quran, for example, mentioned certain things that were in the earlier books. So, for example, it says that, one of the things, it says that the hereafter is better than this life. That in the sheets of Moses and Abraham, it indicates that the hereafter is better than in this life. So this is something that our Quran tells us was in the teachings of the earlier messengers. But it doesn't mean that all the earlier messengers' teachings are preserved, even for us Muslims. So when I say, for example, I believe in the teachings of Moses, I believe in it at some basic theological level. But it doesn't mean that I have it in my hands. I don't have it in my hands. What I have in my hand, to me, again, as a Muslim, that I believe that the only message that was preserved is the teachings of Muhammad himself. But a Muslim cannot say, for example, I'm sorry.
No, you good.
Sorry,
keep going. You good.
A Muslim, for example, cannot offend Jesus, cannot offend Muhammad. We don't, Moses or any of the earlier prophets. If I actually offend Jesus, to me, I will not be a Muslim anymore. If I offend Jesus or if I offend Mary, I will not be a Muslim anymore. That's something. By the way, one other thing that's really interesting is that Muslims, of course, do not depict Muhammad physically. And one of the reasons for that, by the way, one of the benefits for that, for reasons for that, so there are no paintings of Muhammad, is that we do not glorify individual human beings above a human status. So we don't have sacred beings, so to speak, or divine beings. So we love Muhammad very, very dearly, but he's just a human being. So we do not raise a human being. If you have a painting, I will start getting blessings from whatever it is. And that's how deviations actually start. That's why you may, for example, see a movie about Muhammad, a great movie called The Message, a great movie that came out in the late 70s. It's about Muhammad, but they do not show Muhammad, of course. It's like they show him as if he's like behind the camera. And so we don't believe in depicting that, because we believe that whoever plays that role will be degrading to that personality, to Muhammad. The same thing, by the way, about Jesus. We don't believe in depicting Jesus. Or now, of course, you tell me there are movies that depict Jesus. Of course, that's the Hollywood industry. But I'm talking about us as Muslims. We don't believe in depicting Jesus. First of all, we don't know actually what Jesus looked like exactly. I think what people sometimes depict him, mostly, by the way, based on the movie by Frank Zeffirelli, the big classic called Jesus of Nazareth, as being the pale person with the green eyes, and all of that. That this is well. I mean, if you think about it. I mean, Jesus was Middle Eastern, right? So Jesus was not actually white. He was Middle Eastern, so he had some melanin in his skin, But even with that, we don't believe that it should be actually depicted, because we believe it's degrading to Jesus in any way. Even if you bring the most handsome person in the whole universe, and he plays Jesus, we still believe that it will be degrading to Jesus when somebody represents him as such.
Yeah, so Dr. Imad, we had an anonymous question, if I could just ask you real quick. Somebody actually wrote in, they said, who was the first prophet?
The first prophet in Islam is Adam. We believe that Adam was the first prophet, and we believe that Adam, of course, he disobeyed God by eating from the forbidden tree. And we believe that the sin does not fall on Eve. So she's not the one to be blamed. It says that both of them are to be blamed. But we believe that happened before he was a prophet. So the sin of Adam by eating from the forbidden tree, we believe that it happened before he became prophet.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for clarifying that. That was an amazing question. So Damien actually has another great question too.
Oh, Damien has a lot of questions. That's good.
Yeah, he came with the smoke today.
That's really good.
He said, what you're currently talking about reminds me of the Jewish culture and how the read the torch. Is there any correlation between the two when you were talking about reading the Quran?
What I don't know the specifics. Actually, I'm not much familiar with what you're talking about, Damien. But I can tell you, Arabic is a very specific language, and we have a lot of throaty sounds. So we keep our throat very clean in here. We use all what God gave us to make all these weird sounds. And that, by the way, sometimes affects the meaning. So, for example, when you hear the word kul versus qul, there's a big difference between the two words. And of course, it may sound the same for someone who's not familiar with the Arabic language. I mean, I'm trying to exaggerate the pronunciation. So you have kul versus qul. Kul means eat. Qul means say. So these are two different words. So the way it is pronounced, they sometimes, the sounds, the way the sound is articulated changes the meaning drastically sometimes, but not just that, but also sometimes the way you extend the certain vowels, the length of how long a certain vowel can change the meaning. Liyakul or liyakul. One of them, it says, you should eat. The other one says, he should eat. The other one says, so he may eat. So that's why there are some specific rules that the person who's serious about reading the Quran has to observe to make sure that the meaning actually is sound. To make sure that the meaning is sound and the meaning actually is conveyed. So that's why, and by the way, nobody's perfect. People are not expected to be perfect in order to read the Quran. Learning is a process. Learning is a process. So you may find sometimes some famous reciters making mistakes. We're human, of course, so nobody's perfect, but at least we try. And there are some regulations as to how different vowels, different consonants actually are articulated in order to convey the meaning correctly.
Perfect. So I think right now that's no question. Other questions I've seen have come in. So Dr. Matt, you can just continue going.
I think I'm almost like done with what I okay, looking back at the list of things that you have
I mean,
that you
whatever
have
comes up
sent
on
me.
whatever
What?
comes up on the top of your head. I mean, it's always gonna be gems what you're telling us. So I mean, whatever you got, well, cool.
Okay. Let me see if there are any questions. I don't want to take it in a different direction. I can talk. I think one of the questions that you asked me in your points is to talk about the Prophet Muhammad himself. I can talk about that, unless somebody has any question. I guess not. So who was Muhammad? What about the lineage of Muhammad? If you go back, going way back, all the way to Prophet Abraham, we believe that Abraham, who was a prophet, who was one of the greatest. By the way, in Islam, there are the great five, so to speak. These are the greatest five prophets or messengers. In Islam, these are the great five. And these are chronologically in order the greatest five prophets of all the 124,000. The first one is Noah, Prophet Noah. The second one is Abraham. The third one is Moses. The fourth one is Jesus. And the fifth one is Muhammad. So these are the greatest five, so to speak. So going back to Muhammad, to Prophet Abraham. So Abraham was the prophet and one of the greatest actually of all the prophets. And he had two sons. So you have Abraham who had two sons. He had Isaac and he had Ishmael. And both of them were prophets according to Islam. So he had two sons that were prophet, Isaac and Ishmael. From the descendants of Isaac, all the prophets from then on came from his descendants. So all the prophets from that time and then on came from the descendants of Isaac. And that include Jacob, it include Joseph, it include Moses, it includes all of the others came from the descendants of Isaac. From the descendants of Ishmael, only one came, and that is Muhammad. So Muhammad was from the descendants of Abraham. Abraham had two sons, you had Ishmael, and then only Muhammad came. You had Isaac and all the other prophets actually came. So Muhammad was born basically as an orphan to his father. His father, died before Muhammad was born. His mother, Muhammad's mother was 6 months pregnant at that time, and he was born as an orphan to his father. And then at the age of 6, his mother died. So his own mother died, and he was born in the city of Mecca. I'll go back to the question of Damien in a second. He came from he was born in the city of Mecca. And he stayed with his mother until she died at the age of 6, at which time then he moved to the guardianship of his grandfather. His name is Abdul Muttalib. And he stayed with him for 2 years until his grandfather died. And then he moved to the guardianship of his uncle, Abu Talib. And he stayed with him until he grew up, and he got married. But Muhammad was known in Mecca by two qualities among others. He was highly respected and highly beloved, and he was known as the truthful and the trustworthy. So people used to trust him. If they have anything of value, then the best place to keep anything is with Muhammad. Even though, by the way, some of them did not believe in him. Some of them even were fighting him. So they did not believe in his message when he started preaching his message, but they still trusted him. So whenever they had anything of value, anything that is really very special, the best place to trust it, to entrust it with, was with Muhammad. And like I said, people used to love him very much until at the age, and Mecca at that time, by the way, was filled with idols. People that used to worship idols, statues. They make statues with their own hands, and they basically start worshiping them. And the Kaaba, the black cube, was filled with them, that they had a statue or an idol or a god, basically, for each day of the year or for every occasion. This is the god of this is the god of that, And Muhammad never liked that. So he never basically bowed to an idol. He always rejected the idea that how can you make something with your own hands and expect that to help you? And there's an interesting story about one of his companions. His name is Umar. He said that once, this is before Islam, he was going through the desert and he didn't have a god that he prayed to. He didn't have a god to pray to. So he had some dates. So he made some dates. He made a statue out of these dates as a god, and he started worshiping it. This is a handmade god, high quality, handmade, hand painted god. So he made this god, and then afterward he got hungry. So he started eating that god. So that's how silly basically people were, worshiping basically all these multiple idols that they made with their own hands. And Muhammad did not like that. So people used to love him. He is the nicest person, the truthful, the trustworthy, until when he received the revelation, he started preaching the one God. Then everything changed. Then suddenly he became the enemy. And that's the way it is, by the way, today. People like you so long as you're a conformist. You're a yes person. But once you take a stance of your own, that's what people actually oppose you. And that's exactly what happened. After being actually the most beloved person, the most respected person in Mecca, he became persecuted, oppressed, tortured, and along with the people that followed him. That's how the whole thing actually started. To answer Damien's question, do all the traditions and practices you follow today come from only Muhammad? Yes, and some of them no. Because it says that some of them are common with the other traditions. The big thing that comes to mind is pilgrimage. When we go to pilgrimage, then we follow the guidelines of Prophet Abraham in that regard. Because when you go to pilgrimage in Mecca, which is the pilgrimage or Hajj, there, what we do, we emulate what Abraham did. And that's what Muhammad did as well. So Muhammad did as well. For example, one of the things that we do is that when Abraham left his wife Hagar and her infant Ishmael in a place with no water. So she left her infant actually somewhere, and she started going back and forth between two neighboring hills, looking actually for anyone coming by 7 times, back and forth, until Gabriel came and hit the ground next to where her infant is, and that's where the big spring of Zamzam was started. And it's still flowing actually until today. So when we go to pilgrimage, we repeat what she did. Everybody, by the way, the men and the women, we all repeat actually what she did. We go back and forth the same places that she did 7 times, and we circulate around the Kaaba. And we also offer a sacrifice in observance of what Abraham did when he was commanded to slaughter his son. In Islam, in Christianity, of course, Abraham was commanded to slaughter his son Isaac in Jerusalem. But in Islam, the story in Islam is that Abraham was commanded to slaughter his son Ishmael over there. And when he was about to slaughter his son, then God sends him actually a ram to slaughter instead, to sacrifice. So the Muslims around that time of the year, and especially those that go there, they have to offer a sacrifice, a lamb, basically, again, in remembrance or observance of what Abraham did. So some of the actual things that we do go back to the earlier prophets, and these will be common with the earlier prophets, but some of them are specific to actually what Muhammad actually did. Okay.
So Dr. Imad,
yes, Jafar.
So we have actually a couple questions that came in, some anonymous questions. So okay. One of them is, do you have a favorite? Oh, you can't hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, okay. I thought you were. Oh, okay.
Well, I'm just trying. It's a little, my sound system is not.
Okay, so the question is, do you have a favorite prophet story? So I'm assuming from the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, his life. If you have a favorite story that, comes to mind.
About Muhammad himself?
Yeah, about like a story that came from his life, anything that, you really attached to. Or...
Well, there's one that's always, moving me. There's something called the Year of Sadness.
Yeah.
And this is probably the hardest on Muhammad. And because in that year, that was when he was in Mecca, this is around the 10th year after the revelation, his uncle, Abu Talib, who was protecting him, died.
Mm-hmm.
Not only that, but shortly after that, like 2 months later on, basically the love of his life, Khadijah, his wife, died. The Prophet never loved any human being as much as he loved Khadijah, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
No other human being as much as he loved Khadijah. So this is like the love of his life, and she died. Mm-hmm. And his message stagnated in Mecca. Nobody was following his message. So he went to the neighboring city of Ta'if. Basically tried to offer his message in there. Mm-hmm. And when he goes in there, he was chased out of that city with the stones. So people chase him out in the stones until basically he said that he kept on walking and walking, for like, tens of kilometers not knowing until suddenly he woke up finding himself in a place that's almost like 60 miles away. So he was walking so preoccupied with that, with his feet bloodied. And it says, the story says that at that time, Angel Gabriel came to him with another angel, and Gabriel told him that if you want, you can command that angel that's with me, and he can destroy the city of Mecca. He can basically crumble the mountains over the people of Mecca because of what they did to you. And if you think about it, if that had happened, it would be like the story of some of the earlier prophets that were destroyed for oppressing their own prophets. But the first thing that Muhammad said is that no. He says God may bring basically someone from their own children that will worship him. And as he was leaving, he said a very beautiful prayer. He said that my Lord, I complain to you. He says, my Lord, I complain to you about my weakness, about my insignificance in the eyes of the people. You are the Lord of the weak, and you are my Lord. Who are you forsaking me to? Somebody who is controlling or looking down on me. But he says, but yet, if you're not angry with me, I will not care. If you're not angry with me, I will not care. But I seek refuge in your power. Do not let me count on myself or even a blink of an eye. Everything goes back to you. And so this story, especially, by the way, that prayer, actually, I mentioned an abbreviated version of that prayer, It's a little longer than that, He said that this thing actually touches me, of basically that, what controls his interaction with his people more than anything else is the mercy toward. That's why, the word mercy, by the way, and God is the all merciful, we repeat that every time we say anything. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the name of God, the merciful, the beneficent, So this is a basic quality that a believer is supposed to have. And Muhammad said that those that are merciful toward one another, the merciful God will have mercy toward them. So this is one of the stories, that there are many others, of course. There are many books written, by the way, about Muhammad. Many books written about him. So a person cannot say, well, I read everything. I read probably about 25 to 30 books, and that's not everything. There's so many more that I have not read. There's so much that was written actually about the life of Muhammad. So that was one of the questions. You had another.
Yes, that's actually a follow-up to that question. Somebody asked, is there, and from all of the prophets that you can think about, is there any other story, like a good story that you kind of think about?
Well, there's one, of course. There are many, of course, but there's one story in particular because it's mentioned complete in the Quran, the story of Joseph, Yusuf. So if I were to choose one story, I would say that particular. That's for me that particular story. There's a whole chapter called the chapter of Joseph, and it mentions the whole story of basically how when he was a child, his own brothers plotted to kill him. He was sold as a slave, and he was tempted, by the wife of the king, and he was imprisoned. That story actually, in particular, actually touches me really deeply. It's a beautiful story.
No, it's a very beautiful story, and I agree. Yeah. And then, if it's okay, I want to ask you just one other question that popped up. So, somebody wanted to ask because they love, what you're saying. Do you teach any courses about Islam on campus?
Actually, we have the MSA. Actually, it's supposed to be at this time. Actually, every Wednesday.
Yep.
And Jafar sometimes comes late, and he's a star. I'm just kidding. Jafar is a star in that class. So every Wednesday, you see the star behind him, right? There you go. So we have it's every Wednesday at 12 o'clock from 12 to 1. So we have a weekly class, for the MSA that we teach actually. So you can join us. I think if you sign up with the MSA, they can send you the Zoom link.
Definitely. We can send that out.
So you can share that with the others, and everybody's welcome.
Perfect. And so there actually is just the one thing is that people wanted to ask about the qualities of the Prophet, peace be upon him, about some of the miracles that happened in his lifetime.
Well, see, there are we believe that each prophet has his own miracles. But we believe, again, this is what we believe, that each prophet's miracles were connected to his physical presence. Once that prophet is gone, his miracle is gone with him. So, for example, talking about Jesus doing certain things, for example, curing the sick. This is something that happened and is gone. When Moses, for example, parted the sea, this is an event that happened and is gone. And the reason for that, because they were meant for a limited, actually, period of time. But we believe that Muhammad's miracle, Muhammad was meant to be the last prophet. So his miracle was supposed to outlast him, so to speak, to outlive him. So even when he's gone, his miracle is supposed to remain. That's why we believe that the miracle of Muhammad is the Quran itself. And the wording, and some of the things that are mentioned actually in the Quran, even though there were certain things that happened during his lifetime that were something that were like supernatural, for example, if you call them that. But we believe that those were not the miracle of Muhammad. The miracle of Muhammad, we believe, is the Quran. So for example, in here, and it's the expressive ability. In certain things that were mentioned that, scientifically could not have been known at that time. For example, that says that the gender of the fetus, of the newly born child, is determined by the father and not by the mother. And we know that for a fact. For example, it says that each planet and star has an orbit. People used to think that the Earth is fixed, or later on the sun was fixed. But the Quran says that everything, every star and every planet is actually going through an orbit. So this is an example. Now, this is not to say that the Quran is a book of science. It is not. I remember once somebody told me that, what does the Quran say about dinosaurs? I said, why should the Quran say anything about dinosaurs? It says nothing. The Quran is not meant to be a book of natural history. It's a book of guidance. But some scientific things are mentioned like that as a proof. So this is one aspect of it, one aspect of that, of the miraculous aspect of the Quran. But more than anything else, it's the language of the Quran and the expressive ability of the Quran.
Wow. Perfect. Thank you so much, Dr. Imad. So Damien has another question that just got pinned right now. If you could say,
can I form a relationship with Allah the way a father has with his son? I think here it becomes a matter of a semantic, of basically, like somebody says, can I consider myself to be the child of God? And in some traditions they say that Jesus is the son of God, but we are all the children of God. So anyway, it's just a naming things. And I think it is better to go beyond the name into the concept itself. So can a person have a close relationship with God? I think this will be a beautiful relationship, to make the relationship with God to be a more personal thing. But to keep in mind that it's not a relationship between two human beings. It's a relationship between a creator and a created. And I think that can be even more solid and more intimate than a father and a son, of what Damien actually has described. Because the father and the son, there's that love and care and all of that, but it's limited. But you can have a relationship with God that is much deeper, much more intimate, much more personal than that which is between a father and his son. So sometimes, the names, basically play a role in here. I think going beyond the names into the essence of what we're describing. But I do believe in having a personal relationship with God in that sense. That's why, by the way, in Islam, we don't have confessions. The relationship is direct. So we don't confess to anybody. The guys here at the MSA, they don't confess to me. Well, I mean, so nobody confesses. Well, who do I confess to? I mean, if I'm the one that people confess to, then who do I confess to? Because I have sins, just like the next person. Everybody has sins like the next person. So here, again, so the relationship is a direct one, is a direct channel. There's no mediator in Islam. Actually, the Quran says that God is closer to you than your jugular vein. It doesn't get any closer than that. There's a chapter in the Quran that says that we are closer to you than your jugular vein. And there's another verse in the Quran that says, if my servants ask you about me, God says, if my servants ask you about me, I am near. I answer those that call me when they do so. So the relationship can be, as beautiful as the father-son relationship is, it can be actually even much better than that.
Wow. I mean, that's amazing, Dr. Imad, because, you feel that intimate relationship that, when you're making a prayer, you feel that closeness. So that's an amazing thing. So I wanted to go back real quick to when you talked about the lineage of prophets, when you talked about Prophet Abraham and his son Ishmael. So one question somebody had was regarding the lineage of prophets, how some of them are connected in a way. And are they connected throughout time from Adam all the way to Muhammad?
Well, we know after Abraham. We know after Abraham, that after Abraham, all the prophets. So Abraham, again, as I explained, had two sons. You had Isaac and you had Ishmael. Isaac, all the prophets from then on came from his descendants. So those can be connected in a way. So all of them, David, Solomon, all of them. Now Lot was his nephew, was related to Abraham, so he was not from his descendants,
Yes.
But from then on, all of them came from the descendants of Isaac. Now from the other side, which is Ismail or Ishmael, all only Muhammad came. So that's why if you look at the lineage of Muhammad, it can be traced back all the way to Ishmael, all the way to Abraham.
Wow. That is amazing. And then, so was there any period of time to where there was maybe a gap to where there was no prophets? Or
Yes. There were time, and this is what the scholars have a certain name for that. That there were periods. Now, by the way, not just period, but also places. So there are certain places that may have not received prophets, and in Islam it says that these people who have not received prophets, their judgment will be different, because there's a basic verse in the Quran. It says we will not hold anyone accountable or punish anyone unless they receive a messenger. So somebody, for example, who never received a messenger, who never actually, or lived in betweens, for example, or in a geographically isolated area, their judgment will not be like someone who did receive a message and studied the message. So that's why the judgments are not the same for each person. It depends on how much the person is given. So obviously, if a person, we know commonly in Islam that if a person is rich, he has a more difficult judgment than a person who's poor, because he has more assets to account for.
Yep.
And the same thing can be said of a person who is, let's say, has certain talents, who has certain intelligence, who has certain information. So the judgment will be based on what the person actually was given.
Perfect. So we're coming to a close real quick. I know, just like everybody else, I'm sad to, I want to hear Dr. Imad go all day long. But so I just wanted to ask real quick if there's 3 more questions. We have room for that. Maybe 3. If it's we'll take a couple, maybe a minute or so to just look.
If there are any 10 last questions.
You know what? We'll just be here until tomorrow morning. It's all good. Don't worry about it. But so we just have a couple more minutes, that we'll look at that. So, but while we're waiting for that, I just want to plug in what's going on for the rest of the events for the entire week. So tomorrow we're going to be having the Black History Month panel. And then also later in the week on Saturday, we're also going to be having our Muhammad Ali Day of Service, where we're going to be partnering up with Sahaba Initiative to be able to donate food to the homeless people who are struggling during COVID right now, because we're all hit really difficult with this. So I just wanted to plug that in. Please come through to the later events, everybody. We want to say a moving speech. And we want to see you guys there. You know what I mean? It's just a great event and it's a great purpose. So please come through. And I want to thank Dr. Imad also for just, being amazing with all this. So
thank you so much.
I think we'll just wait maybe a couple more minutes, see if anybody has any questions. And
I just want to say, by the way, if you hear me teasing Ja'far, it's only because he's very dear to me. Allah knows what I'm saying. Allah is my witness. He's very dear to me. That's why I give myself the freedom to tease him. It gives me pleasure.
It's a pleasure to be teased. Made my day even better.
Ja'far is dear to me, and he knows that.
Yeah, and the feeling's mutual. You know that, Dr. Imad. Cool. So then also the event is going to be tomorrow at 4 p.m. for the talk for everybody who wants to know. And then it's going to be also Friday at 3:30 p.m. Inshallah, God willing, that we're going to be having Muhammad Ali Day of Service. And so I think right now we don't see anything else from the chat. If you guys have any other questions, you can always email us, and we can always forward that to Dr. Imad or also our chaplain here, Sheikh Ahmed Al-Kurdi and Sister Yafa. And I think we're just going to close the event off right now with that, if that's okay with you.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you all for attending.
Assalamu alaikum.